After founding the Center to Study Psychiatry and raising awareness about psychosurgery in Congress, renowned author and psychiatrist Dr. Peter Breggin started the project to examine psychiatric technology, bringing national and then international attention to the blatant lack of scientific, political, or ethical critique of the disturbing trend of psychosurgery and electrical brain stimulation.
Mental illness is a myth, a fraud, a bad metaphor, an excuse, a rationalization. It's a religious viewpoint held by psychiatrists which says that human troubles are somehow medical in origin and medical in their solution. Now, just how poverty, unemployment, unhappiness, fights between husbands and wives, beatings of children, anxiety, alienation, just how all these problems relate to medicine and relate to illness is never stated.
I might not have ever even had any kind of a movement get started, but became an international movement because I couldn't get any science writers interested. I couldn't get anybody to cover it. In fact, I called the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease and asked him if I could do an article on psychosurgery, and he said, "What are you talking about? Jose Delgado's a dear friend of mine."
In September 1967, following another long, hot summer of urban race riots in major cities across the U.S., Doctors Mark, Irvin, and Sweet wrote a controversial and timely letter to the Journal of the American Medical Association, suggesting that riot leaders could be suffering from brain dysfunction. This would prove to be a turning point.
In 1967, rebellions erupted in the Detroit black community. In a letter to the Journal of the American Medical Association, 3 neurosurgeons, Drs. Sweet, Irvin, and Mark, put forth a theory as to the cause of the violence in Detroit. They said in part, I quote, "There is evidence from several sources recently collected by the Neuro Research Foundation that brain dysfunction related to local lesions plays a significant role in the violent and assaultive behavior of thoroughly studied patients. Their idea was subtle but clear. The reason individuals were violent during rebellions was due to a brain dysfunction which they felt surgery could correct."
Then I found, of course, the JAMA article where they talked about it at length, explaining how ghetto rioters must have abnormal brains because not everybody was rioting. So clearly, people who weren't rioting had normal brains, and the few who were leaders. We're talking now about men you could name, like Rap Brown and others. We're talking about some men who were outraged at the conditions of life in which the children were growing up in these ghettos. And these men were, from the perspective of many in the black community, the only hope. They were heroes.
Of those heroes, Dr. Sweet was quoted as saying,
"We're talking about senseless behavior. The proponents of urban disorders seem to be the people who are most likely to suffer from organic brain diseases."
And the idea that a leader must be the crazy one because you don't agree with them ideologically or because you're afraid of them doesn't make any medical sense. But boy, did it make political sense. Wow.
The kind of violence that we're talking about here, social unrest among a population in a repressed community, can only be seen as a kind of brain dysfunction by ignoring the legitimate causes of the behavior. And my reaction to the letter from which you quoted and to the whole idea of trying to deal with social violence as if it was something wrong inside of the people's heads who are violent is a way of refusing to look at the legitimate social causes of a very important and significant kind of behavior.
To the extent that medical science has created this new, in quote, technology, there is the desire to use it, you see, and the most logical population to use it against are poor people, black people, and people who are incarcerated.
The Boston doctors called for an extensive research project to identify the early warning signs of violent behavior and pinpoint, diagnose, and treat people in inner cities with what they termed low violence thresholds, before they had actually committed any violent acts. And what do you know, but their JAMA letter just so happened to include specific language taken directly from the good doctor's own proposal for a brand new research project which aimed to do just that.
I found out that William Sweet had actually talked to the New York State Legislature trying to get funding, describing how this surgery of stimulating brains and melting holes in the heads of people might be a cure for ghetto violence, because surely the leaders of the violence were abnormal and had abnormal brains that could be fixed with psychosurgery.
The first phase of the Boston Violence Project was officially titled The Medical Epidemiology of Criminals. For it, Drs. Mark Irvin and Sweet had designed a 5-hour-long multi-phase screening process, which included 17 psychiatric and psychometric assessments, 5 hormonal assays, chromosomal, fingerprint, and dermatoglyphic analyses, an EEG, and what they called a cyber-medical evaluation. The doctors suggested these factors could somehow indicate which individuals were more prone to commit violent acts than others, singling them out for preventative neurological treatments before they could pose a danger to society. The project was seemingly the perfect cure to what was then being declared society's greatest illness.